Well, hello and welcome to this latest video. In this video we're going to look at manipulating image size for HTML. So here we go. In the previous video, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link at the top for you to have a look. We created a couple of images and we had a background image on the page. I'm actually going to remove the background image for now, as it's not really necessary, and most of the time you don't have a full background image. The image is usually in a section or a div or something like that, which we haven't covered yet, but we will get to very shortly. So we have the two images. If I just split them apart just to make them a bit easier to see. Right, so the first image, we've given it a width and a height, and in the second image we only gave it a width. Now if you remember, we'll just start the server so you can actually see the images. The images were actually stacked one on top of each other because we'd done no formatting of the position of the image, so they were literally being displayed by the browser next to each other, but as there wasn't enough room, they were one on top of the other. And what we did, okay, as you can see, just one on top of the other, and if we make the browser full screen, you can see that they're side by side. Okay, so with just a little gap in between, so let me just take that back and we'll resize this. Right, so we've got the width and the height. Now this hasn't changed the actual size of the image, it's just changed the dimensions of the image. So the images are still quite enormous and taking up quite a lot of bandwidth being brought down. So there are a number of things you've got to remember. By just putting a width and a height either as an attribute or as a style sheet value, then all you're doing is changing the displayed size. You're not actually changing the actual size of the image, it's just the display of the image. So it's always a good idea to have a number of different sized images for your browser, because a lot of people still pay for their bandwidth, pay for their download, and it is actually quite expensive. So they will actually use their browser in a smaller size, and they don't like to have a big bill because you've decided not to resize one of your images. So let's have a look. First of all, we're going to need to create a new folder because I want to keep this as is. So we're going to call this HTML7A. Okay, and then what we will do is we will copy HTML7 and we will put it into HTML7A, and there we have it. So we can close that because we're now going to be working in HTML7A. So first of all, what do we do about changing the sizes of the images? Well, there are sort of set standard sizes that people have. You have the sizes for the phone, you have the sizes for a tablet, you have the sizes for a small 14-inch screen or whatever, 17-inch screens and above. So there are various different sizes, and what I will do is I'll put the information about the various screen sizes in the information below, in the notes below. Okay, so you can actually see them on that. So it's always a good idea to create images for each screen size, and then what you do is allow the browser, by using the picture element or the CSS, to bring down the required image for the size of browser window that's being used. Okay, so we need to first of all open the File Explorer, and you'll see, I'll just close 7 and we'll open 7A. Okay, you'll see 7A here. Now what I'm going to do, the first thing is I'm going to click on images and I'm going to create a new folder in there. So we'll click on new folder and we're just going to call it 640. Okay, now so what this means is that the images in here are going to have a width of 640. I mean, you could have actually put 640 by 480 or something like that, but I'm going to just, for now, 640. Okay, so how do we actually resize the image? Because if you look at this, this is 2 megabytes in size, and if we actually open it, I'm going to open it with Pix. Okay, first of all, let's have a look. The image viewer just allows you to view the image. Okay, you can then open it with a browser, but we don't actually want to do that. You can open it with GIMP. This is GIMP, and it's known as GIMP. That's a very complex and very useful image manipulation program. It really is exceptionally good. It's as good as Photoshop, if not better. But it's probably too powerful for what we want. So I'm going to go with Pix. Now, you could do the same in Windows by using probably Windows Paint, actually. You could probably do everything you wanted to do there. So this is Pix. Now, when you open it, it will give you a list down the left-hand side of the images in the folder. And usually on the right-hand side, it's closed, so the image takes up the full width of the screen. Okay. Now there are a lot of things you can do in Pix. It's a bit like Paint, a little bit on Paint on steroids, should we say? Windows Paint on steroids. But the one you want is this icon here, which says Edit File. I mean, you can actually go and edit the file in different ways, but we want to edit the file using this. And what you have is a list of items here. Now the ones that you're going to use most, excuse me, I've got something in my eye, sorry about that. The ones you're going to use most are either rotate, resize, or crop. Okay. Now you may well use the others. It depends on what you require. But the most common one will be the resize one. So if we click on resize, okay, you get another number of options. Now it's very important that you keep the aspect ratio, okay, and you'll see that they've got a number of aspect ratios, okay, and you want the image aspect ratio, the one that says image. I mean, you can see the screen. This is my screen, so it's 1280 by 960, that type of thing. But we want the image aspect ratio. That's quite important, because if you change the image aspect ratio, the image could look rather strange. So here we've got it listed in percentages, and we actually want to change it to pixels. Now you can see that this image is 2 megabytes in size, and that it's 3840 by 2160 pixels. Now that's an awful lot of pixels. That's enormous, and it's going to cost some people quite a lot of money to bring that down. So the first thing we want to do is actually create an image that is a lot smaller. So what you do is, in width, you type in 640, because if you remember, we're doing 640 here, and when you actually click in the height, it will automatically resize it, and because we've got the correct aspect ratio here, it will put in the correct height to preserve the aspect ratio. Okay, so now you need to say OK, and it's actually done it and it's confirmed that's what you wanted to do. And you'll see at the top it says modified. So now we need to save it. So File, Save As. Okay, if we come into 640, now it's given it the name. What I recommend you do is after the name you put in 640, and this is to remind you the size of the image, so you know what it is. It's your choice. I mean, you could just keep it as banana split because it's in a different folder, but I like to actually have the size of the image as part of the image when I've resized it. So I've put in that and click on Save. You get a number of options for JPEG. We could, and it's probably a good idea to change it into to a ping, but at the moment we're just going to do it as JPEG. The quality, you can leave everything as is and click OK, and there it is. It saved it for you. Okay, so if we go into here and we open 640, you can see if we open that in the ordinary viewer, you can see the image here in 640 by 360 pixels, and it's retained the aspect ratio, and the picture looks very good. It really does. Now the difference is, look at the size. It's 105 KB, and if we look at the size here, it's 2 megabytes. We've reduced the size enormously, and I do mean enormously, and that's going to load on the page much quicker. Now let's just look at a couple of other things that we could do. Right, we've got this modified, we've saved the file, saved as. Okay, so I'm surprised it's coming at modified, but let's just come back to it and click on Save As again. Okay, we'll come into the 640, but now we want to actually change the file extension, and it would be a good idea to change it to PNG because that is a much better extension usually for use in the web. So I've changed the name of the file, and I shall remember to put the 640 on the end. So it says banana split _ 640.png. I've got PNG at the bottom here, and we'll click on Save. Again, you've got compression level. The more you compress it, probably the worse the picture is going to be. So leave it on standard. If you don't want any compression, of course, take it off. Now, if we go back into the folder and we have a look, you can see that it's actually a much bigger picture than the JPEG, but you'll have a better quality of image. So my recommendation is usually to use the JPEG, but the preferred one for the web is to use the PNG format. Now the PNG format does give you other options as well. So for example, transparency is much better on PNG and things like that. So if you do want transparent backgrounds and you don't want as much hassle with them and things like that, then use the PNG. Okay, so it's still showing up modified because this is the original picture. So let's go to the next one, and we'll double click on it to bring it up. So we'll click on resize, and it's remembered what we did to the last one. It's remembered the aspect ratio. It's remembered we wanted 640. So we'll click on OK and File and Save As. We go into the 640, and this time I'm going to just leave it as a JPEG. So we'll add the 640 to the end and click on Save. Okay, we'll leave everything as it is. You could do progressive. What that means is that it comes in sort of a part at a time. It actually fills in a part at a time rather than all appearing all at once. So we'll do it as progressive, but it probably won't show for what we want, simply because it will come in much too quickly. So if I just double click on it, yeah, you see, you didn't actually see the progressive filling in from the top down, which is what would normally happen. But on a slow connection, they would actually see that filling in from the top down. And again, if you look, it's a small image. The original image was 2.2 meg, and the image now is about just over 100k. So I mean, you've saved a tremendous amount. Now, if you're doing it for the phone, you'll actually be making smaller images than the 640. 640 is tablet size, or most of the tablet sizes. For the phone, you'll actually be doing much smaller. And when I produce websites, I usually produce them with 4 different sizes of images: phone, tablet, sort of normal 14-inch display, and the normal 17-inch display. So 1920 is probably the largest I'll create, so that we're not actually downloading masses and masses of images and data. It makes the site much quicker. Okay, so how do we actually use these in our program? Well, let's come back to image, and here we can actually use it by putting in, let's see, a picture tag, and we have to close it. Now this is new in HTML5. I haven't told it it's an HTML5 document, so that's something I will need to do in a moment. I will actually have to give it the HTML5 information at the top, otherwise it won't necessarily use this new HTML5 information correctly. But before I do that, let's just put the information in. So first of all, oops, bring that down the way. We have to put in what the image is. So, oops, put it in the right place, Mr. Lavelle. Okay. So, image. We need to tell it what the standard source is going to be. So it will be in images, and it was called Sailing Ship JPEG. Okay, so Sailing Ship Point JPG. Okay, we'll close the image tag and we'll give it an alt tag. Oops. I'm having problems spelling today, I must admit. You probably saw that before I. Okay, if I save this and we bring Opera in, and we need 7A. Okay, so now you can actually see that we've got the very large image at the bottom, and I'm going to leave it like that. Now what we need to do is to tell the system that we've actually got a smaller image. So this is again a tag that doesn't have a closing tag, and the tag is, the attribute is source set, and then we can tell it where that source is. So it's the sailing ship here, which is very nice. You can actually see it. So that's in images 640 sailing ship.jpg. Okay, home. And now we need to tell it what the media is. Now, media can be quite a lot of things in HTML5. Here we're going to look at the screen, but in general we're just going to tell it the size of it. So we're not going to actually specify a particular type of media. Okay, so if we actually put in something like min width and we give it a size 640 pixels. Oops, not 540 pixels. Okay. Right. When the size of the browser window gets down to 640 pixels or thereabouts, it should then show this image that we've put in here. Okay, so if we save that, and let's bring the browser to full screen. I have made an error. I didn't put the closing tag on the source. Okay, so as you can see, sailing ship in St. Malo Harbour. Okay, what is the problem? Sailing ship JPEG, sailing ship in St. Malo. So where are we? Let's have a look. 7A, images, sailing ship.jpg. And the error I made was not to put the 640 on the end of the name. If we bring it down to, now if you see that, because we've gone below 640 pixels, it's now actually showing that. Now if I change the min width to max and save, you'll see it's bringing in the smaller one. So you've got this change of min and max. So min width, it will show one size, and max width means that anything underneath the max width is the image it will actually show. Okay, and min width, it's the other way around. Once it gets down to that, it will show a different size. Okay, so the default image is this one here, which we saw when we put in min width. It's now showing the default image, so you can see we can't see it. Now if we say max width, so once the browser width is above 640, it will actually change the size of, whoops, I really detest, not just a little bit, I really detest this new system of Opera. And as you can see, we've gone above 640 and the image has, and as we make it smaller, we get down to 640 and there we go. So these are ways that you can actually tell the system to download the correct image, and it will save people a lot of heartache, especially if you're creating sites for people who have slow connections and things like that. If you're in, of course, a corporate environment, then it doesn't really matter that much, though you don't really want to slow the network traffic down because they're using it for other things. But if you're doing it for normal everyday people outside corporate environments, then you're going to need to think about the size of the images, and it's very important to make sure that you have the correct sized images. So what you do with picture is you put in a default picture that it will show, and then you create a number of sources for different sized browser windows. And then what will happen is the browser will automatically download the correct size image for the size of the browser, and that way you're going to save a lot of bandwidth and your page will be a lot quicker. Now, there's nothing to actually stop us resizing this picture, even though we've actually told it that this is the one to bring down. We can actually resize it by using attributes in here, so you can actually do that if you wish. Now, one of the other things is that you remember we kept the aspect ratio, and it's always a good idea to keep the aspect ratio and then crop the parts that you don't want. So for example, we don't really want this part at the end, and we don't really want that part at the end. So to crop, if we click on crop, you get a box which you can then drag and drop. Now I don't want the light. Right, I think about there would be good. And then we just need to bring it down to about here. Unfortunately, can we get rid of the cars? Do you think we could get rid of the cars if we do that line there? And we bring it in so it's about the same size. And so what do you think? That looks okay. I think we've removed most of the cars. Unfortunately, we've got the road sign, which doesn't really help, but we've got mainly the ship and the background. We're happy with that. As you can see, you could actually put in your own crop size if you want to move it just a little bit left or a little bit right. For example, we might want to move this just one because of that there, so I've moved it just a little bit to the right. You've got different grids that you can show. Here it's in thirds, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, and it's saying there's no aspect ratio. You could actually go back into the aspect ratio if you wanted to, and as you can see, by doing so, we've actually got a bit of a problem, because then we need to bring it down if we're going to keep the aspect ratio, and let's see, it defeats the object. Okay, so if we take it back to none, okay, we can, let's just make that smaller, take that to there, and here, because we've got no aspect ratio, we can move it about. We've got that car in, I think we've just got about enough. So we've actually changed the aspect ratio of it. We can then click on crop, and there's the image. Unfortunately, we've just got the top of the car, and then quite simply we just save as before, and you have your image. Now remember that here you've got a different sized image. It's not 640 by 480, it's now 494 by 343. So remember that when you're actually creating max widths attributes, either in CSS or in the element tag, that you actually make sure that you've got the correct widths if you're doing it. Otherwise the picture could look very strange. I'm not going to keep this picture because it doesn't look very good. So what I shall do is I shall get rid of this. Now to do that, you click on File and you can press Revert, and as you can see, it goes back to the picture it was before, and you can see we're on the 640 image that we had before, and you can see it's specified as not modified. Okay, I hope you found that useful. My name's John, and I'll see you next time.